Hi, welcome to Box on the Box Rock and Celluloid, Bot for short. I'm Edward Box. So, 'tis the season to be jolly. It's Christmas, and a typical thing at Christmas is, or of the past, is they would often show a big film on Christmas Day or Boxing Day, typically a blockbuster film. So I thought, as this year's Crimbo present, I would do my top 10 blockbusters. But what is a blockbuster? I think a blockbuster is more than just a popular film. I think it somehow has to capture the zeitgeist, which was the spirit of the time. It needs to be the film that everyone's seen that year, and it needs to be very successful as well. So one of the principles I put behind this is that every film I've picked would have grossed over $1 billion in inflation-adjusted figures. And I'll be able to give you the gross figure at the time and the inflation-adjusted figure. Typically now, it's not uncommon for films to gross over $1 billion. But there's so much stuff out there in the marketplace, it feels sometimes that there's just a lot out there and it doesn't really capture the moment, so to speak, what I was talking about. Something like Avatar Way of Water, that was grossed $2 billion, but did it kind of capture everyone's mind the way Barbie did? I would say Barbie grossed nearing $1.5 billion. That was a film this year that really captured the imagination. So I would say that's the blockbuster of the year. Oppenheimer, that's maybe crept over $1 billion, I can't remember, or maybe it's just a bit under. Really big film, but maybe just not quite that big, Okay, so a few blockbusters I picked out that didn't make the cut that really did sort of capture their time. Rocky is one. Rocky, if it was released now, easily grossed over $1 billion worldwide. Another one was Grease. I remember seeing Grease at the time. Cheesy film, but a lot of fun. But again, it was just the film that summer, 1978, everyone went to see, everyone was sort of talking about. Back in the past, before the concept of the summer blockbuster, which we'll talk about, which I think in a way is where the concept of the blockbuster comes from. Predating that is William Friedkin's The Exorcist. It's hard to believe how big The Exorcist was now, an adult, slow-burning adult horror film, absolutely massive hit back in the day. And then, of course, another one I picked out was Superman, also from 1978, the original superhero film. Released it now, grossed $1.3 billion. So, yeah, typically films like The Avengers, Avengers Endgame, and Infinity War and so on would gross more. But I think it's fair to remember that back then you didn't have the markets we do now. Obviously the Chinese market, although it's tailed off recently because of COVID and so on, was a big factor in grosses in this kind of genre. And the marketplace is a bit bigger now. And also there's 3D as well, which puts a premium price on, and IMAX as well, on screen ticket prices. Obviously, 3D's gone by the wayside a bit, but some of these films are picked up, particularly Superman and things like that, I think their gross now would be bigger. So there's a few I picked out that could have made this top 10. But my first choice at number 10 is a film that came out. This is my most contemporary film. I thought this was great after COVID and after all the problems of that for the cinema and things going straight to streaming. This film came out, and it was a film you had to see at the pictures. You got everyone talking. And it did that really amazing thing where it managed to be better than the original to me, and it managed to sort of build on that and almost recreate itself to be something more adult, more interesting, but still touching base with its original source. And of course, Maverick, the Top Gun sequel. So this grossed just under $1.5 billion when it came out. The figures I'm giving you today are based on 2022 ticket prices. So Maverick will say $1.5 billion, so easily fitting our blockbuster metric, so to speak, grossing well over $1 billion, really capturing the zeitgeist. Everyone talking about going to see it, very much the film experience that year at the cinema in terms of like the big film. My next choice at number 9, this film has got a special place in my heart. When I went to it to try and go and see it the first time at the Palladium Cinema in Kendal, it was sold out. So I think we joined the back of the queue and then we couldn't get in. People won't remember this. And no one queues for tickets now for cinema. They just pre-book them and it sells out. You just book the next showing. Back then, my local cinema had a big screen upstairs and a small screen downstairs, and that was it. The Odeon in Newcastle only had 4 screens, and that was, you know, a lot of screens. Anyway, what film was it? It's E.T. 1982. This gross is a bit funny here because it got re-released, but its original gross is $793 million. Inflation adjusted 2.6 billion. So again, that easily puts it in the area of Avengers, Endgame, Infinity War, Avatar, that kind of gross. You have to remember as well, again, no Chinese market back then and so on. So massive film. I mean, this film, if you had to pick a film that didn't just define, you know, that summer, it defined the whole of 1982. Really, it was a cultural phenomenon. I still think it's an amazing film. I like it more now than I did actually. I just don't think we kind of get films like that anymore. Number 8, I'm going to pick a film by the same director. I'm going for Close Encounters. Obviously 1977, not as big as that other film from 1977. But again, a gross $307 million back in the day. That would easily be $1.45 billion now. So hitting over $1 billion gross. You got to remember now, Close Encounters is going to go to the IMAX, isn't it? You know, it's going to do well in China, probably other territories. So who knows what it grossed now. Great film, you know, amazing musical score, great direction, great performance by Richard Dreyfuss. Again, kind of like, you know, if you had to pick a comparison like something like Oppenheimer, you know, an adult sci-fi that had a bit of wonderment that kids can enjoy as well. Amazing. And again, the you know, entered the cultural lexicon. It was used by the James Bond film Moonraker 2 years later. Amazing film. My number 7 choice, I think this is one of the most perfectly kind of constructed films, and in some ways it's kind of like a small, not a small film, but I think its ambitions were small. It's just to entertain. It's not to be kind of profound. It doesn't happen on a massive canvas, but it's just so well written. It's so entertaining. It grossed $389 million when it came out. That would be an inflation-adjusted gross now of $1.15 billion, so on the lower end. But it's 1985's Back to the Future. What I love about this film, it's perfectly cast to the point they actually ditched the original Marty McFly and got Michael J. Fox. The screenplay is so well crafted, and it's just under 2-hour running time, and I love how plot points are kind of pre-telegraphed in visuals and so on, like, you know, when they're going to have the dance, it's advertising the Under the Sea, is it? Or Beyond the Sea dance, or whatever it's called, in the corridor of the school, full of brilliant jokes. The Chuck Berry joke. It's just a perfectly made film for what it is. You know, I actually didn't see it the pictures at the time. I saw it on video. It was excellent. As I've watched it since, it's one of those films that just gets better. It's just like, does what it says in the tin again. 1985. It was very much the film that captured the imagination. Still does. My number 6 choice. This is a groundbreaking special effects blockbuster from 1991. It's Terminator 2. This original gross was $520 million. Inflation adjusted now would be about $1.3 billion. Again, in the Chinese market, if it'd come out now, I think it would do very well because they're into robots and things like that. Superb, incredible action. I remember going to see this at the pictures. I think it felt it was a bit long at the time. But we just couldn't stop talking about the effects and the action. I remember seeing the truck chase, and I still think that's one of the defining action sequences. And although the effects are kind of simple by today's standards, they're such a good standard and integrated into the story. They stand out. This is a mistake that the modern blockbuster makes. It's just an over-reliance on effects, over-reliance on CGI. Sometimes the CGI is poor because of rushed production schedules, and it just doesn't feel very special effects, whereas these effects felt very special. And of course you had Arnie, the big global superstar at the time, you know, the biggest movie star in the world at that point, kind of tying it together as the moment it was. Number 5, I had to pick a film featuring this bloke. In the early 60s, these films were the blockbuster films. They were the films that people talked about. This was the film that really opened it up to the world, and what they call Bond mania. And of course, it's 1964's Goldfinger. Might have gone into 1965 a bit as well. in America. The next year's film, Thunderball, was the peak of Bond mania. That had actually the biggest Bond gross. But this one, $125 million gross at the time, 1.36 billion gross if you released it now. I think, of course, the way to work out box office gross is you take the average ticket price then, divide it by the gross then, and times it by the ticket price now. Not an exact science. Again, James Bond did get a foothold in China with Skyfall. Now, in actual fact, Skyfall, I nearly picked Skyfall as my Bond choice, because Skyfall in 2012, with the British the Olympics, was holding the Olympics and that whole thing, the Queen, you know, Skyfall captured the moment in British culture, and it was massive. It grossed about $1.1 billion. You know, if you release it now, $1.4 billion, probably about the same as Goldfinger. So it's a close run thing, but I think, you know, the reason I picked Goldfinger, those Bond films in the 60s, particularly in that period, Goldfinger, Thunderball, were just the thing. Bond mania, it went insane. It went insane to the point where Sean Connery got absolutely sick of it. Okay, next up, no surprise for this one, we'll have a pick at number 4. A lot of people will pick as number 1. It's just I've got other films I prefer. But of course, it's that little thing called Star Wars. If you had to pick a film that defines blockbuster status, but entering the whole culture and kind of spreading above and beyond, Star Wars would be the choice. A little hard to adjust the gross on this, because of course it had the special edition re-releases, which did the original special edition release in I can't remember what it grossed in 1997, but it was it was a big amount. But anyway, I've got a figure of $776 million. That's the original gross, which is about 520 plus the special edition. That kind of tells you what the gross was there. Wikipedia says it's 3.4 billion, 3.45 billion. I've got it at 3050 billion. Not sure, but this is, this is a film you can just absolutely defines the summer blockbuster, changed the summer blockbuster, or set the new standard from a film that went before. Yeah, a massive gross, massive cultural experience. I nearly picked Empire as another one. That would gross about just under 2 billion now. Empire's a great sequel, and everyone's buzzing about that. I think kind of people trying to talk about that more now because of the great plot twist and where it is in the legacy of sequels. But Star Wars actually came out in 1978 in the UK. I think, for all the size of these Marvel films and so on, nothing will ever be like Star Wars. I think if you had to pick one blockbuster, one film, capturing the zeitgeist, being that moment and just spreading beyond that, Star Wars is it. Yeah, massive. Okay, my number 3 choice, the reason I picked this over Star Wars is I just prefer this film, and the two I'm going to pick after. I think this is one of the most perfectly crafted films ever in the action-adventure genre. And I remember going and seeing it on a hot day. I remember it was a hot day in Kendal, and I went into the Palladium Cinema in the afternoon with an old friend and his younger brother. Raiders of the Lost Ark. This grossed $390 million back in the day. If you released it now, it would be just under 1.5 billion, about 1,477. Again, with the Chinese market and so on, 3D, it might have added more. Just brilliant castings. Harrison Ford, Karen Allen, amazing villains, brilliant cinematography, locations, brilliant special effects that still hold up. In the truck chase, it has the greatest single action sequence ever committed to film. The only two things that I think come close or as good are the truck chase in Terminator 2 and, of course, the great chariot race in Ben-Hur. Absolutely brilliant. The 2 sequels, as enjoyable as they are, never came close to it really for me, although they're a lot of fun. The 4th one, well, less about that the better, and obviously I've covered the 5th Indiana Jones film on this channel elsewhere. But amazing piece of cinema, and it gave us the character of Indiana Jones. Amazing. So that's my number 3 choice. My number 2 choice, this is the film that is the granddaddy, the birth of the summer blockbuster. This is the film that released in the summer, and they realised, hold on, if we release films in the summer, we can market them a certain way, and people have time to go to the pictures, the cinema, and go and view these films several times. Why they hadn't worked this out before, we'll never know. Of course, it's Jaws. Steven Spielberg has got like 3 films on this list, and he produces Back to the Future. No, he's got E.T., Close Encounters, Raiders and Jaws. He's got 4 on this list, and he produced Back to the Future. He's the executive producer. This film's amazing. I mean, the gross on this film was $476 million back in the day. It's had a few reissues. It easily grossed $2.5 billion now. So again, it's putting it up there with experiences like Avengers Endgame in terms of gross. Amazing film. What's brilliant about this is it's such a slow burn, it's such a 70s film. In actual fact, like Star Wars, Close Encounters, they have that slow burn. They're just building character. The opening of Jaws, you can see where they're filmed. They're obviously using real members of the public who live there. There's bits where I think it just shows a guy in his fishing shop or something. I can't remember, but it's just life happening, and it's cast not to be starry, it's cast to be right. And none of the people who are cast in the film main leads are all known actors, but none of them were stars. They were respected and known names. Robert Shaw, amazing. He's got like the big, large part. Richard Dreyfuss is kind of like the geek, really, and Roy Scheider's the everyman. I think Roy Scheider's the secret weapon in this. Roy Scheider's a very underrated 70s star, 70s actor. I love him. And he actually had more success, going right through to Blue Thunder. But really interesting, and of course the shark looks a bit crap, but it doesn't kind of matter. They keep out of the way. Loads of problems on this film, but it just became a phenomenon. I remember my older brother going to see it for his birthday, or maybe he was going for someone else's birthday, and it was like, oh, what's this Jaws? I wasn't allowed to see it, but it was really scaring people. Just great. The opening's great. It's got the scares. There's loads of great tales about this film, about how they shot stuff like putting milk in the editor's swimming pool and doing the headshot, and just a different era of movie making. Still doing you've got your movie brats, still doing the 70s thing. Obviously it all became something different later on. Now our cinematic universes and lame superhero films and endless sequels, and this had certainly 2 very poor sequels. I think Jaws 2's okay. But I love this film. It's an all-time classic. It's a classic film. It's a beloved film. It's a favourite film of people. It's also a big fuck-off blockbuster. Okay, Maverick, E.T., Close Encounters, Back to the Future, Terminator 2, Goldfinger, Star Wars, Raiders of the Lost Ark, and Jaws. What is my number 1? It's actually also my favourite film of all time. Not a summer blockbuster, but this is a film, again, that has entered the cultural lexicon. It caught the zeitgeist at the time. It also happens to be one of the greatest films ever made. For some people, it's the greatest American film ever made. And it's, of course, The Godfather. On its original gross, this grossed $270 million in 1972. If we released it now, it would gross $1.67 billion. Incredible film. Marlon Brando, incendiary, iconic, giving us Al Pacino across 2 films with a sequel in one of the great achievements in screen acting for me. James Caan, fantastic. I think this is the most perfectly cast film ever, this and the sequel. I think that one of the things when you go through all these films are perfectly cast. They're all brilliantly cast and they've got great scripts. Casting, the scripts, the blueprint, the casting is bringing that script to life in characters, and then the director has to visualise that with his team, production design, cinematography, and so on. The Godfather accomplishes that and more. Incredible film. I love it. I never get tired of watching it. What's great is every time I watch it, I get a bit more out of it. And that is my all-time blockbuster. And that's very fortunate for me. The all-time blockbuster is also my favourite film. It's also one of the greatest American films ever made. So there you go. And it shows that blockbuster films can be brilliant accomplishments. They just don't have to be a load of shitty CGI. And think of like something like Jurassic Park, Fallen Kingdom, or the last Jurassic Park. Both films that grossed over $1 billion. I mean, the third one was terrible. It doesn't have to be that way. You can get kind of smart blockbusters like a Barbie, that are intelligent and interesting and different and standalone. I think the thing is to stay away from sequels. Really, sequels can be great. We've got Maverick on here. We've got Terminator 2, Goldfinger, as part of the series. But sometimes sequels can really run out of ideas and they trade on the original genius or greatness of the original blockbuster blueprint. Okay, that is my films there. That is my top 10 blockbusters. There we go. Just one last thing I've observed on this. All these films are generally directed by auteur or visionary filmmakers, apart from Maverick. I wasn't called Joseph Kosinski a visionary, but he's a good director. Goldfinger, directed by Guy Hamilton. Really, Hobbs, Broccoli and Saltzman are really visionaries there. So that says something, the director getting great directors in to do these films, can elevate them. And there's an example with the Marvel films where they employ hacks to direct the films, and that means the films aren't what they should be. Anyway, that's my little Marvel rant there. Okay, see you again. Have a great Christmas, and remember, share and subscribe. Thanks very much.